Hello there friends and welcome. For today's BG3 guide we have all about the BARD class. And it might surprise you to know bards aren't just extremely versatile in Baldur's Gate 3, but they're also the class that enables the highest number of attacks per turn, that's right. And with this build you can have even up to 15 entire attacks. Frankly, you have so many that in most battles you won't even need to use all of your resources, right? Because usually just 10 attacks or so is more than enough to dispatch entire enemy packs, even on Tactician mode, especially after a very nice alpha strike and ambush. And it's not just about the number of your attacks, because their damage will be quite outstanding as well, with multiple elemental sources even. As a matter of fact, even as early as level 3, your Bard will already gain the most powerful ability to enhance your number of attacks, so it's not one of those builds that only gets good later. Combined of course with all of the other great benefits a Bard has to offer, including a lot of high skills for easy dialogue checks, especially when it comes to the charisma ones, for a true party face, befitting of the main character. So without further ado, let us get into our Bard highest attacks per round build, first with character creation. When it comes to race, lately I've really been enjoying the half-elf, as you get a lot of nice elf bonuses, together with human ones, all in the same package. Dark Vision, which is amazing when combined with the Fog Cloud spell for ranged attacks, even early, and the increase to base ratio speed when you choose the Wood Elf subclass. Of course you can also use Tiefling, as always, and Azariel for extra smites, but some of them cost a bonus action, which for a dual wielding build I find a bit annoying. Besides that, Halfling, so you won't fail whenever rolling a 1, which trust me is very annoying when you have so many attacks, although Advantage can help overcome that, unless you get very unlucky and roll 1 twice in a row. I mean, it can happen, trust me. But that's pretty much it. For cantrips and spells, as always, please remember that I already have a best spells guide you can check to the side here, where I cover each choice in depth, so let's keep it simple and short. Blade Ward, which can prevent damage even coming from ranged enemies, and you can always spread buff with this, together with Light for some nice uses. I'm not focusing into, let's say, Vicious Mockery, because ideally you want to unleash your double attacks per round as early as level 1 when dual wielding, but you can pick it if you want. As for level 1 spells, definitely Fairy Fire, one of the best choices, even for the late game, because it can force advantage on all attacks against the enemy that fails the saving throw, and the area of effect is huge. Sleep can help very early game. Long Strider, of course, to increase the speed of all allies, and you can cast it an infinite amount of times out of battle, especially when you consider you already have extra movement by virtue of being a wood half-elf. Heroism can help a bit early on, it's just that I'd rather Fairy Fire, and both require concentration. Besides that, it's up to you. Speak with Animals can help if you're playing the main character, right, because it can open some quests and extra fun dialogue. Your starting instrument doesn't really matter, it's mostly cosmetic when it comes to changing the little tune whenever you cast a spell. For stats, feel free to dump intelligence as always together with strength. Set the +2 when it comes to dexterity, so we can start with 17. This way, as always, as early as level 4, or in the case of this build, level 8, by defeating a certain hag boss during Act 1, you can already acquire 20 dexterity. 14 constitution as always. And as far as charisma, assign a +1 so we can start with 16. It's not going to matter that much for this build, but can help early on, especially for dialogue checks. For the leftover 2 points, I like wisdom because at least it helps with avoiding some enemy crowd control effects. And when it comes to the background, ideally one that complements the skills you want to have. Because you can only pick 3, and you want all of the 4 skills here, Deception, Intimidation, Performance, and Persuasion, although there's not that many performance checks, but well, it's a classic Bard skill. Anyways, pick a background that grants you one of these 4 skills together with another you want. For example, Criminal has Deception and Stealth, and there's always Charlatan for Sleight of Hand instead of Stealth, so you won't need to use another party member to unlock chests and disarm traps. My preferred pick is Criminal, however, I'll just use Astarion for the rogue purposes. From the second level onwards, I'll continue as a human, right, as always to show you that any race can work. And we'll want to continue Bard progression until we get our second attack. Don't forget that the second level Bards get the very useful and quite unique Song of Rest ability, This essentially adds an extra short rest to your party, right? You have 2 by default, with this 3. Which of course has amazing synergy with classes that restore their ability uses or spells like Warlocks on a short rest, including our very own Bard, once we hit level 5 for our extra attack abilities. You also acquire Jack of all trades, which can be useful by adding half your proficiency bonus to ability checks that you are not proficient in. So you're truly quite versatile when it comes to skill checks. It's not going to be just the charisma dialogue skills. For extra spells, you might as well go with either Healing Word or Heroism. At level 3 we at last get to choose our archetype. And of course what we want is College of Swords. This is the archetype that lets any multiclassing combination achieve their ultimate attacks per turn potential, because of the very unique abilities you'll get now. There's actually 3 of them, and each has either a melee or ranged variant, right? So you can use them with whatever weapons. And Slashing Flourish is the one we want. It lets you attack 2 enemies at once. You can either choose the same target, right, for double your attacks, or separate targets, 1 for each. Each use will also cost a Bardic Inspiration. By default you'll have 4, and it's only going to be recharged on a long rest. But as early as level 5, we get to recharge it on a short rest instead. So essentially you have what? 4, 8, 12, 16 entire uses per long rest. Which means 32 extra attacks per long rest, of course. Because of the way this works, abilities or items that restore actions such as Haste or the Elixir of Bloodlust will mean you get even more attacks, right? So long as you have Bardic Inspirations remaining. The second is the Defensive Flourish, which lets you attack while also increasing your armor class by a huge +4 amount for 1 turn. It doesn't need any saying, +4 really is that good in a low numbers game like BG3. So it's not just about multiple attacks, right? The Swords Bard is versatile enough that you can even tank at the same time. Lastly but not least, we have the very fun Mobile Flourish. Just like the Warlock's Repelling Blast ability, this will deal your full attack damage together with also pushing the enemy back 6 meters, even higher than Repelling Blast. You can even teleport to the target afterwards, but for ranged characters it's not really that useful. Anyways, as you can see, it is quite the stacked subclass. You even get a fighting style. Sadly we cannot choose archery, so you're kinda stuck with 2-weapon fighting if you are dual wielding hand crossbows, for some extra offhand damage. And as if all that was not enough, at level 3 you'll still have your level 2 spells, right? Cloud of Daggers as always for area of effect damage, and you can as always push enemies back into it because of our Flourish ability. Or you can also pick Silence to handle enemy spellcasters, Hold Person, which becomes quite good later on, once you get to hit more targets. And besides that, See Invisibility, quite handy to handle some annoying enemies that always go invisible. At level 4, pick any cantrip you want. You might also go with Friends, which fits a high charisma party phase character, and also any other level 2 spell based on the ones I mentioned. And you can of course replace a level 1 spell for another. For your first feat, well, the choice is very simple for any ranged build. Sharpshooter, of course, to increase our dual wielded crossbow damage to the max, right? It's only, after all, a +10 static bonus to each hit, plus the ability to snipe enemies above you by eliminating high ground penalties is amazing as well. And yep, the feat is so good that I would rather delay the dexterity increase for later, plus at this point you could already have 18 anyways by defeating the Hag boss at chapter 1. Now level 5 is also huge for a Bard, because it's when we get to restore our Bardic Inspiration uses on a short rest. So now we have 4, 8, 12, 16 of them. The increase to your Bardic Inspiration dice also helps because it increases the damage of your Flourish abilities. And we get level 3 spells. Sadly by default Bards don't get Haste, at least not the Swords Bard. To me the best ones are Hypnotic Pattern, amazing for crowd control, or Glyph of Warding with the Sleep variant, also for the same purpose. Level 6 will be your last Bard level because it's when we get our second attack per round, which of course equals double when combined with our Flurry ability. Any other level 3 spell now. Level 7 is when you want to multiclass, and of course we want Rogue for the Thief subclass as always, right? After all, it's another bonus action, which means more offhand attacks with your crossbow. Because of sharpshooter, each hit is like a truck. Sneak attack will also work, by the way. You can also choose to enhance any skills you want, ideally the dialogue ones, right? Intimidation and persuasion, the last is up to you, might as well go with acrobatics. Level 8 is just the classic dash and hide as bonus actions, which can help a bit, but in many cases you'd rather just attack with your offhand weapon as a bonus action. And level 8 at last is when we get access to the Thief subclass for even more offhand attacks. At level 9 you still want to remain a Thief for the second feat. In our case, of course, ability improvement to set our dexterity to the max. 20 for extra damage and 2 hit chance. As for level 11 and 12 you have two choices. Fighter, twice for the action surge ability, which once again is amazing when combined with your flourish for extra attacks. Or 2 levels of druid and spore druid for an extra 1d6 necrotic damage on every single attack you have. Considering you have 10+, it's really good. Amusingly enough, druid will even let you cast up to level 5 spells, although only upscaled versions of the ones you already have, not true level 5 ones. Anyways, I'll just go with fighter because the whole gimmick of the build is having the highest attacks per round, right? And for that, we need fighter's action surge. Don't worry because I'll soon release a rainbow damage build stacking as many sources of elemental damage possible on one single weapon, in which case I'll be going with druid of course. But for now, fighter is the way to go. For fighting style, definitely archery, right? The +2 to ranged weapon attack is amazing, even if it only comes late game. And at level 12 we have the classic action surge. It even has synergy with our bard because it gets recharged on a short rest, right? And we have triple of those because of our song. Alright, now let's discover gear for our bard sniper build. For the helmet, as always, ultimately you want Seravox for the further boost to critical range, and since we have so many attacks per round, even early game, it really helps to increase your criticals to the max. Sadly, this is Act 3 only. For Act 2, however, you can have almost the same by just going with either the Dark Justiciar helmet or the Covert Cowl. Both do the same, except instead of being a permanent critical range increase, you'll need to be obscured, also very easy to do in this game. For example, my character here is slightly obscured, which is enough. If I was to move close to a direct light source here, we would lose that and become fully lit instead, thus the full sun icon here. Now there's also something to be said about the Diadem of Arcane Synergy, as it will increase all of your ranged attacks by +3, or higher if you went with higher charisma. For cloaks, just a classic Shade Slayer cloak for even higher critical range. Only from stealth, however. For armor you have a few different options. As our character max dexterity, you can go with the many armors that are medium, but let you fully apply your dexterity modifier to AC, the best being the armor of agility, which of course is the way to go if you want the highest AC possible. I just don't think it's needed for a ranged build that kills enemies in one turn anyways. Especially because by virtue of your high dexterity, you'll also have very high initiative to ensure you act first, even if you don't ambush the enemies. Agility is Act 3 only, but for Act 2 you have the UNT armor, for example. Something I like doing is equipping the Elven Chain. It does have low AC but looks rather nice, and increases your initiative by +2, which I find highly useful for this type of build. For gloves, at Act 1, even very early, you definitely want the gloves of archery for a +2 to ranged attacks, right? Including our dual crossbows, when it comes to damage, that is. Later, you can go with the Hell Dusk gloves for higher damage, 1 to 6 fire. The Legacy of the Masters for +2 except to both damage and attack rolls. Or the Dark Justiciar gauntlets for 1 to 4 necrotic damage on hit. Don't forget the Wondrous gloves, which do have nice benefits for a bard. After all, you'll not only get 1 to AC, but an extra use of bardic inspiration even if you equip the gloves whenever, right? Which does translate to 2 extra attacks. And as far as the fire damage from Hell Dusk, don't forget you can always drop a torch and dip your weapon into fire, right? For 1d4 instead of 1d6. Except where you can do it as early as the beginning of the game at Act 1. Lastly, the Martial Exertion gloves will work as your last way of acquiring yet another attack per turn, for the total of 15. I just think it's a bit overkill, right? Because come on, you have more than enough attacks. But hey, if you wanna min-max, this is the way to go. For boots, there aren't that many important choices here, just a classic Disintegrating Nightwalkers for Misty Step for free. As a ranged character, it does help to teleport to high grounds to get advantage and avoid melee strikes. And I suppose you can also go with the Speedy Light feat to generate lightning charges for extra attack rolls and damage. It's just that this costs a bonus action once you become a rogue, right? Because you have to dash. And as you cannot pre-buff with it, you have to do it during battle, well, it's going to eat one of your potential offhand attacks. Also bonus actions. For amulets, my new best friend is the Broodmother's Revenge. Whenever you are healed, for 3 turns, your weapons will do an additional 1 to 6 poison damage. It's actually 1 to 4, right? It's a display bug here. Ideally, you want this healing effect to come from the Cleric's Healing Word spell, especially the Area of Effect version Mass Healing Word, as it can hit multiple allies and is cast as a bonus action. This way, you can also proc other powerful benefits on heals such as Blade Ward and Bless, together with temporary HP as I've explained to you in my Shadowheart Cleric tank build where I covered the gear choices that let you do this. But anyways, here we are, dipped in poison, and it is 1d4 as I mentioned instead of 1d6. Sadly, you cannot stack this effect with dipping your weapons into fire, which is why later you might prefer to just combine the fire effect from the Helldusk gloves instead, for nice multi-elemental hits. And as always, the Surgeon's Subjugation Amulet if you want to destroy bosses utterly and completely by forcing a critical hit with a paralyze effect, which means double damage taken. When it comes to rings, the risky ring is as always the most optimal choice here for any character that wants to attack a lot, with sharpshooter penalties on, to of course generate advantage on all hits, which by the way also highly increases your critical hit chance, especially when you are stacking other critical boosting gear. Besides that, just some other extra sources of damage, such as the Caustic Band for +2 acid, the Strange Conduit Ring for 1d4 psychic, and the Callous Glow for 2 radiant. Now let's get into weapons and consumables. Melee weapons do matter for this type of build, starting from around the 2nd act, as some of their passives will be applied to your ranged attacks as well, so ideally we wanna focus on the critical range boosting ones, such as the classic Knife of the Undermountain King found at the 2nd act, together with the Blade of the First Blood or Bloodthirst found at Act 3, both increase your critical range, and we can have up to +4 critical range increase with our gear. And for ranged weapons we of course went with dual hand crossbows because we can dual wield them for extra attacks. The best ones all found at the 2nd act. The Hellfire hand crossbow, and then you can choose between Firestoker or the Nether Misser for the offhand. The issue with Nether Misser is the damage, well the main damage is force, right? I'd rather Piercing, at least later, because you can then combine it with the Ballist armor so that enemies around the character will become vulnerable to Piercing for extra damage, but of course you want this on a melee or tank character for example, not on your Sharpshooter Bard, right, because they won't be close enough to the enemies for the aura to hit them. And don't forget, you can find +1 or normal hand crossbows even at the very start of the game at Act 1 in the Druid Grove. The Tiefling merchant there will sell both of them, but it's somewhat random, right, so if you don't get them to spawn, just save before long resting as to restock his inventory. And when it comes to consumables, it's going to always be the classic Elixir of Bloodlust for even higher attacks per round. Well, alright friends, so this was it for my ultimate attacks per turn Bard Sharpshooter build. If you found it useful, as always, please remember to like, subscribe, and consider becoming a channel member too if you can. I really appreciate your support. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends.